I had a life-turning moment, a very close brush with death. If I am still here, there's got to be a better purpose.
Our guest today is Sash Bee, someone who has dedicated 20 years of her life to foster caring. Now, foster caring isn't a subject that is spoken about in South Asian community very often. I'm just trying to understand how and why.
A way of giving back, add value to many children's lives, and they would come in and add value to our lives. Children who come from traumatic backgrounds have learnt to survive, to find those little gaps. And if they see any little bit of weakness between you and your husband, they will play on it.
The people that are fostering, do they have to be married, or do they have to be like a man and women together? Or
foster parents come in every shape, size, form, background.
It's quite abnormal in our communities. What do you think is our problem?
I think we have a slight element of ego and a bit of snobbery.
Before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, supporters and well-wishers, if you have been enjoying our podcast and its contents, please do consider subscribing to our channel on the platform you are tuned into. It's a funny story how we, got acquainted. My wife, she tunes into your social media, TikTok lives, and she's always talking about you. And then she took the step and she said, "Oh, my husband does the podcast. Why don't you should talk?" And then she told me, "Oh, you should get Sash Bee on."
No, that was wonderful of her. We had an exchange on one of our lives, and it was really nice. And then she kindly invited me, and I was more than happy, the opportunity to come meet with you and to be on your platform, perhaps raising a bit of awareness for my platform.
Amazing, fantastic. Now, what you do has always been... I've always been curious because I've met someone else. His name is Uncle Mas. He used to work for us as well. And he does the foster caring as well, but I don't think he does it in a very probably on the scale that you do it on. But he did make me aware, and he did expose me to foster caring. And I've always thought, wow, this is quite interesting. How does one? Before we do, just for our viewers to understand who Sasha is and what does she do, and what her purpose is. Give us a brief, introduction.
Well, I came into fostering over 20 years ago, and I think it was because I had a life-turning moment, a very close brush with death. And I think we know that when you have something like that happen to you, when I nearly lost my life to a rare illness, I had a rare form of bacterial meningitis. And I had 4 young children at the time, and a husband, and a business. And the fact that the doctors had almost given up on me and had told my husband that we actually can't do anything for her was a real shock to the system for him and for me. And I think at that point I made some very conscious decisions that if I am still here, there's got to be a better purpose, and it can't be that I'm going to get sucked back into the rat race, chasing a career, chasing or trying to grow my business further. And with 4 young children, it was really a turning point for me. I decided that I wanted to spend my time with my children, because the thought of having left them with nobody to care for them was beyond my comprehension. So at that point, I made the decision to stay at home, heal, and give my children the time. My husband and I had always wanted to adopt. That was something that we wanted to do, to give back to community. But as I started exploring adoption, I stumbled across fostering. I hadn't heard of the concept. And when I started to look into it, I realized that actually it ticked so many boxes for me, and it was a no-brainer. I decided that that's the avenue I was going to take.
And how long ago was that decision?
20 years ago.
20 years ago?
Yeah.
Wow. And talk to me a little bit about this whole predicament or incident or illness that you've had. How long did it last? How did you discover, and how did you feel? I
think I was perhaps overworked, stretched, and manic at that point in my life, because I was running a business. It was a startup with my brother. We were doing incredibly well, and it started to really grow exponentially far too quickly. And I think perhaps with all of that, I was vulnerable. I collapsed with bacterial meningitis, and I was in hospital for 2 months. There's no cure for bacterial meningitis. It's just a case of antibiotics. So they administered whatever they could. It was trial and error. And when they thought that they had actually managed to suppress the bacteria, I was allowed to go home. But I had a relapse, and I was back in hospital for another 4 weeks. And at that point, the doctors felt that they had lost me. But alhamdulillah, I recovered, and that's...
How did you recover? I mean...
it's one of those things. It was a case now that they'd given me as much antibiotic as they potentially could, because it was a case of then do they continue with the antibiotics, because my white blood cells were dropping and there was a fine balance, and they had to make a executive decision as to when to stop. They stopped, and luckily for me, it stopped the disease, and I recovered. And I fully recovered, actually, which is quite unusual, because this can lead to all sorts of impairments, disabilities, but I was lucky to have come out of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And it was a long recovery journey. I mean, so I, at that time, made another big decision. I moved out of London, moved into Kent, and took that time to heal with my children and give them all my attention.
Wow, that's incredible, because I too was stuck in hospital once.
Really?
Only for 2 weeks though.
Yeah.
Now that I'm listening to your story, 2 months and then having to be going back. That's a very. I'm sure there are other people with bigger illnesses, and they're probably going back and forth into hospitals for more frequently, longer period of time. I know some people who don't have kidneys and they have to keep going back to the hospital. I mean, I swear to God, I don't know how these people do it. Honestly, the strength that they have is commendable.
Yes, and I think that is what the awakening is, that we are very blessed to have health. And the minute something goes a little bit askew, then we're in big trouble. And so, yes, it made me stop and appreciate the blessings that we have, and also then to compartmentalize in my mind what is actually the most important thing for me moving forward. And so you shed a lot of dead wood, you make some changes, and then you have a new path, new focus.
Amazing. So you have 4 children.
I have, yes.
And apart from wanting to give something back, what other changes did you make when you came back home? I mean, after the second time, I'm sure that fear is still in the back of your mind, like, oh my God, it might come back,
Not so much.
Okay.
Not so much. I have great faith that whatever's meant to be will be. But occasionally, if I get an odd headache, then the whole family starts panicking. They're sort of rallying around me because they've experienced it. And my 4 children are very young. My youngest was 5 at the time. My eldest was 12. So he firsthand experienced that trauma that we went through as a family. But I put in place lots of things. And one of them was that I made a conscious decision I was going to stay at home. I was not going to leave the home to work. So I was going to, at some point when I felt I was ready, I was going to start up something from home, a business, or maybe go into teaching, but part-time, so that I could work around the children. I was still contemplating that. And we were loving it. We were loving this time of being together and healing and taking a different perspective on life. And then I stumbled into fostering. And fostering is a career. It's not just that we're looking after children. It's very different from adoption. So, that was the move that we made.
What are the key differences between fostering and adopting?
It's a huge difference, actually. Adoption is when you are bringing a child into your family. It's a lifelong commitment. They are going to become part of your family, and you are going to become their legal parent. Whereas with fostering, it's a career where you're working with lots of children. You're doing short, medium-term, long-term work with these children. You're helping them kind of navigate their traumas and their experiences. But it's multiple faceted. It's not that those children become your legal children. You do not become their legal parent. it is the corporate parent, which is a responsibility held by the local authority or sometimes with the biological parent. So you have a responsibility to support these children whilst they're in your home for however long, and then they move on.
So why did adoption come to your mind, as opposed to, I'm sure there are various other things that you could have done. The reason why I'm asking is because there had to be some sort of a calling towards that, and I'm just trying to understand how and why.
Well, my husband and I had always talked about adopting a child once we'd had our own family. So adoption was the buzzword at the back of our head that we were always going to pursue. When I became ill, we felt that was the right time now to look into this. However, I did not know what fostering was at that point. So when I stumbled across the idea, the concept of fostering, it was different, but it also was a way of giving back. But actually, it was a career. So it meant that I could work with children and actually add value to many children's lives, and they would come in and add value to our lives and add lots of blessings as well. And I think that's why we chose fostering.
So I'm sure fostering comes with its own challenges as well as rewards. And I'm sure there are many, many beautiful stories that you have perhaps helped develop.
Yeah.
What's the oldest one, and what are they doing now? Do you follow up?
Yes, I have children who have been in my care who are now in their 30s, and they've moved on to do really good things. They're married, they've got families, they are active in the community. So my oldest child that I don't have actually particular contact with is in his 30s, but he's just recently got married and he's moved away from Gravesend. So one of the nice things about the children that we've had in our care is a lot of them have settled around us, and we have a community around us. If you're talking about the longest child that I've had with me, then he's still with us, and he's been with us since he was 2 years old, and now he's 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how many can you do at any given time?
So technically you can only have up to 3 children in your care at one time, because if you have any more, then the whole structure changes, because then it becomes a residential type of setting and more commercial, which is not what we are doing, because we're offering children a family environment. So 3, unless, of course, any one of your children is part of a sibling group, and there's 2 that can stay together.
So the people that are fostering, do they have to be married, or do they have to be like a man and woman together, or can it be just an individual person?
Shafiq, foster parents come in every shape, size, form, background, ethnicity, sexuality, gender. There is no required format or required expectation. You can be single, you can be married, you can be same-sex couple. Anybody can apply. It really depends on your individual circumstance, because you will go through a huge assessment process.
What are the processes? I mean, so you've decided that you want to consider foster caring. What do you do? Like, for example, me, Shafiq, I want to do foster caring.
Right. So essentially, there's a couple of routes you can take. One of them is that you can approach the local authority, so wherever you're based. You contact them, and children's services within that local authority are the people that you'll want to speak to, and they will be more than happy to speak to you, to come out and have a chat with you, explain the processes. That's if you want to go down the local authority route. The alternative route is an independent fostering agency, which is the private sector. And again, you would contact a local agency that maybe interests you, you like their ethos, you like their structure. You approach them like you would do with any other organisation, and then they will do the same. They will send somebody out to talk to you, explain the process, and you take it from there.
How was your first, how did it feel? Like you've made a huge decision. In our communities, I can speak for myself, Bangladeshi community. I haven't seen many people do foster caring. It's quite, maybe wrong to say, abnormal in our communities. It's not the norm. You've taken that direction, and then now you have someone else, another dependent, aside from your 4 dependents.
Yeah. Look, the reason why I've now come on TikTok and I'm trying to build a community is for that reason. There is such a shortage of foster parents in the UK. And if I was to talk about the South Asian communities, particularly, yes, you are absolutely right. There is such a negative perception of what this is, what fostering is, and people look down upon it. This is something that I want to challenge, and this is something I want to raise awareness for, because in the 20 years or so that I've been doing this, I cannot understand why something so rewarding and something so needed in communities around us is shirked. It's looked down upon. It's got negative stigma. Why? And that is the million-dollar question. And I think we need to challenge that mindset. We need to talk to people about the importance of offering support and a family environment safety to children who are in need and who have had experiences that are just not, positive. They've had trauma. They have had all sorts of negative experiences that they need help with.
So from your 20 years of research and understandings and observation, what do you think is our problem?
I think we have a slight element of ego and a bit of snobbery, where when our first generation of immigrant parents came here, they came here to work hard and provide us with security, stability, education, and moving their children forward into successful professional careers was a huge thing, still is. And this doesn't quite fall within that. You can't refer to yourself as a highly professional doctor or an accountant or whatever. So parents have this negative perception that they want, and of course the expectations often were that you were going to go to university, you're going to get a degree, and you're going to go into something that is very respectable. I think that's what it is. The key is that a lot of the South Asian families don't think of it as a respectable direction to take. They certainly don't look at it as a career. They certainly don't accept it as a profession. They think it's just somebody who's lost their mind looking after somebody else's children, and for what reason. So that is what needs to be challenged.
It's that somebody else's element, isn't it? It's somebody else's. And I think when it comes to that aspect, we are quite narrow-minded,
Yes.
where it's like, why should I benefit that person? Why should I help that person?
Certainly. And I think, I'm happy to say that it's not just in our culture, it's across the board. There is a lot of stigma from all cultures. But if I was to focus on the South Asian community, it is that. And I have that kind of direction coming from everybody, from my immediate circle, my family, my extended circle. So it's been an eye-opening journey. It really has. It shows you what people's perception and what their approach and attitude is. Crazy.
Now that you've done it for 20 years, what is their perception now?
I would like to think that because time shows commitment, it shows that there must be some focus, that there must be something that is really holding me to something so strongly, that there is an understanding, an acknowledgement at least, if not respect, but there is some kind of a real understanding beginning to develop in families and friends around me, because they've seen that we've done a lot of work and we've been doing it now consistently for so long.
Has anyone from your family said to you, do you know what, I'm going to consider it too and I'm going to do it? Or are they still working in progress?
Actually, from my immediate family, no. So clearly I haven't done a great job of influencing anybody in the immediate family. But extended family, friends, yes, definitely. I have introduced a lot of close friends and family into the fostering profession.
Do you think they're thinking about the risk element as well? Because, oh my God, I've got my own children, I'm struggling with the ones that I have. Now I have another dependent, who I don't know, what they're going to be like. They might be crazy, they might be mental, they might be something else. Do they give you a brief, okay, this person is this and this is what you can expect? Or you're left to, unpack it all yourself?
You've hit on a few very important things. Firstly, the apprehension that a lot of people coming into fostering have about bringing in a child into their own home where they may be having difficulty with their own children. It's a huge responsibility, parenting, and then bringing somebody else in for God knows how long and what behaviours and what difficulties they will present is a huge worry. So this fostering is not for everybody. You have to have a particular type of robust personality to be able to bring in children alongside your own. That's the first thing. But the second thing is that the actual process itself shows you along the way what the challenges are going to be. That is part of the way that they assess you. They are going to expose and show the absolute extremes of what you could potentially be working with, so that you can understand that this is not just a walk in the park. It is a very, very difficult and challenging profession to be in.
When you say they, is it the authorities?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the assessing social workers.
Okay.
So it could be the local authority, it could be the IFA, the Independent Fostering
So
Agency.
they would expose you to various scenarios.
Because there is a mandatory training that you have to do. It's called Skills to Foster. And in that, they put scenarios in front of you. They introduce you to live examples. They talk about the various traumas that, children may display when they come into your care, various behaviors and needs, complex needs. So they will introduce you to all of that. And it's only after going through all of that whether you are able to then pursue it or not is partly up to you, because you've got to make that decision, and then partly down to the assessment.
So what can you teach children? I mean, is there a boundary around, okay, you can't teach religion, you can't teach this or that? Because being a Muslim person, for example, you would automatically display certain aspects of your own life and maybe to a certain extent project it. Are there any restrictions on what you can do and can't do?
A child is coming into your family. They're coming into your culture, your safe place. So when they come in, you'll find that they, respecting of your values and your culture, they will take to it. They are very resilient. They adapt very quickly. And I have never in my 20 years had a child come into my home, observe us being Muslims, observe our practices, observe our food, anything like that, and reject it, ever. And I have children in my home that have come from all ethnicities, religions, backgrounds. And in fact, they become accustomed to the way we live very, very quickly and respect everything that we put up, structures, boundaries, all of those things. And that is part of the responsibility. We are there to provide them with safety, and safety comes with consistency. Safety comes with structure. Children respond to all of these things that we have to put in place for them. And we've never had any difficulties, and that's my personal opinion on and a reflection on what our practice has been.
Now, looking at the people that are already in the family, your children, how did they respond to when you first, got someone in?
Shafiq, the thing is, you cannot go into this without having proper open communication with your family and children. They have to be on board. My youngest was too young, 5 years old, but she still had some understanding. And I think you have to then explain things age appropriately. My eldest was 12, and the conversations were very open, regular, and we were talking about it for quite a while before because the process takes a while. Mm-hmm. They had teething problems to start with. My eldest, for example, is 12, and I had always thought that we would have a child at least younger than him that would join us first. But our first young person that joined us was 15. So my eldest son suddenly felt like his position had been challenged in the pecking order. He was no longer the eldest. But I think he adapted very, very quickly. And so children may have that, but that's where my responsibility, my husband's responsibility comes in, because that is down to us to manage that dynamic. It's a new dynamic, and everybody needs adjusting, particularly children. But alhamdulillah, my children are spoken to all of the times. That they are advocates. They speak very openly about their experiences. And I would say that they have never looked back. And they have adapted to every child that's come into our home beautifully.
When it comes to disciplining, how does it work? Do you have a soft corner to the fostered child and more rigid processes for your own? Or how does it work? Or is it vice versa?
One thing that happens to you when you become a foster parent, you suddenly grow eyes all around you. You have antennae. You have structures and boundaries, and there are certain boundaries and structures that are applicable to everybody in the house. And there are certain boundaries and structures that are only applicable to your foster children, and certain that are only applicable to your own children. And that is the fine balancing act that we as foster parents have to manage. To give you an example, I, raising my children, never gave them pocket money. I didn't see the need for it. I came from a culture where my parents met all our needs, didn't have to have any money in our pockets. But when we have foster children, we are expected to give them pocket money. And so, there's a possibility that my children felt like they were not being given the same privileges as my foster children are. But they understand. And over time, I'm now a huge advocate for pocket money, I must say. But in the early days, I wasn't. So things change. It's a constant. It's a constant flow of communication. It's a constant flow of information, and the dynamics are always, quite mobile, quite fluid. So you adapt and you change things to the children that are in your care. If you have a child in your care that has particular needs or has particular things that are flagged up in a risk assessment, you then have to make adjustments, and there will be boundaries that are put in place just for that purpose.
Now, two things from what you just said.
Yeah.
Fluidity. I mean, it's always it's a moving part.
Yes.
The whole environment. But first, talk to me about pocket money, because we are raised in a way where we're thinking, it's part of our discipline to perhaps control how much pocket money we give and how much we don't give. You said you're a big advocate now. I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think when I look at my own children and I have my foster children, now with the foster children, what you have to do is you are automatically expected to give them an allowance, and it's age appropriate. So rule of thumb is that, for example, if you have a 12-year-old, you give them £12 per week, pocket money. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, that is what is stated as a guideline. But as a parent, I will be monitoring that, because if I have a child in my care, for example, who cannot manage money and will go out and spend £12 on buying sweets from the corner shop, then of course then it's something that as a parent I will be supporting and helping with. But I personally can't put a figure on it, because I never did it with my own children. And with my foster children, it's each child has their own way of learning and coping with having money in their pocket. It is my responsibility to teach them to budget. It is my responsibility to show them the value of money and to see that they're using it in the most appropriate way. So yes, so a 5-year-old is going to have £5 pocket money, basically, in my care. But of course, I'm not going to give it to them, and they're not going to go and chuck the coin somewhere. What happens is that we save the money, and the child is then with us when we spend it. For example, for toys or clothes or whatever, or an activity. So the practice is very flexible, but it all depends on the needs and your child. And as a parent, we know our children. We, growing up in my culture, in my family culture, we were never really given pocket money. I have never had to ask my parents for anything in terms of cash money. It was always there. It was provided for. We never, it was not a concept. But now I am a great advocate. I think you should teach your children the value of money and how to spend it wisely from a very young age.
Amazing. Now, relationship aspect. Now, you and your husband, your relationship has to be intact pretty much on a very consistent basis, because now not only do you have your own children, I mean, to a certain extent, your own children will probably understand, mommy and daddy probably having a rough time, but you've got other dependents. How do you now manage your own emotions and your own personal, relationship with your husband, because you've got so many variables at play?
That is such a difficult part of what we do, is managing our relationships as well. Now, as in our own parenting, when we were raising our children, there was one thing that my husband and I were very good at, and that was understanding that as a parent, we have to be a united front. My husband and I were very, very clear on that. So if we ever had any disagreements or anything that wasn't particularly positive, or we were on different pages, it wasn't something that we showed our children. It was a negotiation, a conversation, an argument, whatever, done privately, and then we would come back as a united force. That is the same principle we apply in our work as foster parents. And actually, we have to be more on top of things with foster children, because you see, what you've got to understand is children who come from traumatic backgrounds
Absolutely.
have learnt to survive. They've learnt to find those little gaps. And if they see any little bit of weakness or difference between you and your husband, they will play on it. So, you can have a child playing one parent against the other, which is something we all know as parents, that children play parents
No
off.
way.
Yes, of course. And in fostering, that's a big thing. So we have to be very, very secure with one another. And we have we always catch up on, talk about, and let each other know. I'm very, very good at making sure that my husband is fully in the picture all of the time, because he's not at home all of the time. I'm the primary foster parent. My husband works, so he has a patchy idea of what's going on, and it's my responsibility to make sure that anything that's important that he needs to know, he knows, and that we come together as a united front, and there is no gaps or.
It sounds very easy, but I'm sure for many people, in reality, it's difficult.
It's not easy.
When something kicks off, how do you say, you know what, diffuse the situation, and let's have a conversation later on.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. That is the strategy that we use as parents, as foster parents, is that if there is an escalation in behaviour or anything that kicks off, you have to step away. You have to diffuse it there and then. And if that means by asking the child to leave or for you to leave, you do either or, and you allow things to calm down and you come back and deal with it later. That is the strategy.
Do you think it has improved your own relationship because of the foster caring environment?
What it has done is it has absolutely made us who we are, better people, and we are more in tune with all the difficulties and all the real challenges around us in society. It's grounding. It humbles you. It shows you that what we have is a privilege, and that we need to look beneath us to see the trouble, the sadness, the trauma around us. Yes, definitely. And I think every day that we have, we're very, very appreciative of our experiences and the children that we that have brought so much of a dynamic to our family and blessings. Yes, definitely.
Wow. Now, talking from a child's perspective, where are they coming from? Generally, is there a common trend? This is what's happening in their family, and this is how they ended up in a certain situation, or is it all varied and from case to case?
Shafiq, completely varied. We are talking about zillions of reasons why children are not able to remain with their biological families. And it becomes important for the social services to intervene and to move them, even if it's on a temporary basis, away from that environment to provide them safety. And so the background sometimes is patchy. The social services may not even know the full extent of what's going on, but when they see a child in need or a child in danger, it's their responsibility to get them to safety. So we are looking at all sorts of abuse. We're looking at all sorts of trauma because of the abuse. And we're looking at fractured families where perhaps they don't have the ability or the capacity to continue to parent their children. So although ultimately the social services work towards reuniting children with their birth families, there may need to be a break where the children are removed and placed with foster families.
If you have been enjoying the contents today, please do consider subscribing onto the platform you are tuned into and share it with your family and friends. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
In this country, at least, you have this, in many Western part of the world, you have that framework system where a child can go through a certain process and end up with someone, or either at least with the authorities.
Yeah.
In countries that we come from, there is no framework, There is no system.
And this is what I talk about in my work, that we are very lucky in lots of ways. Children have a chance here. If you are in a family where things are broken down, you can no longer remain with them. You're not lost out on the streets. You're not lost. You can be saved. You can be helped. Somebody can make a difference to your life, can add value. And that is what the fostering framework offers in this country. And so, we should respect it. I think we're very lucky to have it. I'm not saying it hasn't got its flaws. It's got its flaws. Every system has its difficulties. But it's at least a hope for a lot of children.
What other stories do you hear from children that are coming in? I'm sure at some point they will start opening up, and they'll start talking about their world and their perspective and what they've witnessed.
So that's what we refer to as disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, disclosure happens. What tends to happen is when a child is traumatized, it takes a long time for them to actually trust people adults. And that can take a long while for us to support them in their healing. They don't often disclose until they are ready. And it doesn't necessarily happen with us. It could be that it happened with a friend or at school or where they feel that they can, be more open. And we have had disclosures. I've had disclosures. So there's a particular protocol that we have to follow, which is the reporting protocol, which is that when a child discloses, we have to be very open to listening. We have to obviously document everything as soon as we possibly can. But when we're listening, it is about allowing the child to speak and give us all the information. You're not going to ask them leading questions. As you know, with interviews and things like that, where you're talking about a sensitive topic, it's our responsibility as the adult to listen and put down all the information and then hand it over to the professionals, because if the child is disclosing something that could potentially lead to an investigation, police intervention, then we need to pass it to the professionals.
Investigation to where they came from.
Yes, yeah. It could be to do with, an abuser, for example, or if they were groomed, or if they were victims of trafficking, or anything like that. So when they've disclosed, depending on the nature of the disclosure, we are expected to then report it to our professional team that we work with, the social worker, the agency, our link worker, and anybody else from then on that needs to be informed.
So when someone goes away from your care, what do you want them to leave with? I'm sure there are some certain points that you would probably consider important to you, and maybe perhaps important for them as well for their onward journey in life.
There's two types of departures we often have. One is when we help a young person move into independence. So they leave our home and they go into assisted lodgings, or they go into their own apartment, or they are out there by themselves. The other one is where they are moved on to another family or to their own family. So if reunification happens, that makes us very happy. We hope and pray that they've moved on with a little difference in their lives. They're more positive, they have more self-esteem, they have had a good experience while they've been with us, and we've added some, feathers to their caps, given them some skills, given them a better understanding of who they are. When they go into independence, unfortunately, that is an area of the care system which I think is particularly flawed. And the transition from being in a home with a family and then being by yourself with just a PA, a personal advisor, and not a lot of support is horrendously difficult for children. And they really do struggle. So that, for me, is an area that often leaves me very concerned. And that's when I'm trying to keep in touch with my children who've gone into independence to continue with the support, because I feel they're very young and vulnerable and don't often have the skills to be on their own.
At what point does the government say, well, you're no longer eligible for fostering, like to the child?
If they were to continue with full-time education, they can be with us up until about 25 even. It depends on their studies, and 25 is perhaps pushing it, but they will get support from the local authority in care up until 25, but they can remain with the foster family if they're in full-time education till 21, 22. They can actually stay on beyond that on a different type of understanding. It's called staying put, which is a unique agreement between you and the local authority that the child still needs your support. So they're sort of staying with you, but more on a lodger basis. And they're learning those independent skills with you, but you're keeping an eye on them. So you still have that kind of parenting hat on, yeah.
It must be very emotional when it comes to the departure points. I mean, someone that you spend so long...
Oh, yes. Departures are not easy. They take a piece of you. It's very emotionally draining, very difficult, takes time. And they are very difficult.
So remind me again, what's the longest you've done with one individual person?
Yeah, came to us at 15 now. Still with us, yeah. And
what's the journey? I mean, what? I mean, obviously at 2, it breaks my heart, honestly. Like, talking about children that I don't know what's the case with this individual, but 2 and going into foster. I mean, how does that make sense? How, like, are there any people out there who would just abandon their children? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Why does it happen?
Neglect is a big part of one of the reasons why children come into care. Neglect and inability to parent, to take care of their simple needs. Yes, and it does happen, unfortunately. And also, one of the problems with our communities particularly is they have a very blinkered view. They don't understand. They think that it's somebody else's problem, that this doesn't happen in our communities. And it does. We have it around us all of the time. I think perhaps the only difference why less children from ethnic communities come into the care system is because we're very good at brushing things under the carpet, hiding, keeping things within that family unit. But actually, neglect and abuse is around us in our families, in communities. And unfortunately, this is something that needs to be challenged and talked about. And that is why children are coming into the care system. And there is such a shortage of foster families.
Is there a rise in cases of foster children?
There is always there is a rise in the in the cases of foster children. I mean, it's a steady rise. What is worrying is the lack of families that are suitable to care for these children. So we're recruiting foster parents and having the places available for this rise in numbers coming into care is frightening.
Now, looking at the positive side, I mean, apart from the good that you're going to get from in our case, Muslims, the reward that you're going to get from Allah, for giving someone a chance in life, what are the financial benefits from the authorities or for whoever is sending the child to you?
Yeah, so that was the difference between adoption and fostering. Fostering is a career, so you get paid. Now, you get two elements to your pay. One is an allowance, which is wholly meant for the child. So this is to cover all their needs. And the other is a fee element, which is for your professional service. And if you think about, I get challenged on this all the time because people assume that you only do this for the money. And you've heard it, everybody's heard this constant perception that we only do this for the money. Yes, we get paid for what we do. And just like, if I was a doctor, when I was a lecturer, I was getting paid for what I do. I was working with children. So, yes, we get paid. And there is a huge element of finance involved. However, there's also a career progression. So you can go up the ladder. You can become more senior. You can add more skills to your cap. I am a therapeutically trained foster parent, which means that I have trained further. So I specialized in children with complex needs, but I also have a different approach, my understanding and my learning of trauma and attachment theory and doing all the things to make us understand that children's behavior is not just something that they're coming up with. It is something that is related to their past experiences. So you are, you grow as a foster parent, and then there are different elements that come in. And yes, you get paid, you get recognition. And that could also be through, a 5-year service. You can get recognised financially, or through,
Give me a ballpark understanding.
I think if you're working for the local authority, and I don't want to quote any figures because I would potentially get them wrong, but I think an annual, weekly allowance for a child ranges anything from about £100 onwards with local authorities, and around £400, £500 onwards for independent fostering agent per week.
Per week.
Yeah.
And you can do maximum 3 at a time?
Yes.
As couples or as individuals?
No. However, if you're approved for 3 and you're a single person, that's absolutely fine. Your individual circumstance will dictate that.
Okay.
If the agency or the local authority think that you as a single parent are more than capable of looking after 3 children, then yeah, absolutely fine. Yeah, no problems.
Now, when it comes to traveling, holidays, how do you navigate, through that?
I am a great believer that one of the most important experiences I can give children in my care is that family holiday. So every year we have a family holiday abroad with our foster children, if they can travel. We have experienced and looked after a lot of unaccompanied asylum seekers, which means that they don't have travel documents. So unfortunately, they can't travel with us abroad. But if a child, for whatever reason, cannot travel with us abroad, we have a staycation every year. And that is a huge part of what we do. And I absolutely love it. I think it adds so much value and gives them so many good memories and experiences to enjoy and add to their, positives.
So what do you do when you can't take a certain individual with you, but you need to go somewhere, maybe as a family?
Yes, and then we have what we call respite. So other families potentially in our network, or the agency will find another family who can then look after your children whilst you're away. Now, my preferred way of doing this is that I have an extended network. So if I'm going away with my family, I have an extended approved network of people who could come into my home and stay there for 2 weeks and look after the children whilst we're away to stop them from having any kind of disruption to their routine. But sometimes that's not necessarily the best option. It is nice for the children to go to somewhere else as well for 2 weeks. It gives them a little bit of an organic break and they have fun, because respite care is slightly different from having children long term. The respite families are then looking to give them a fun factor to the time that they're there. So they'll do activities, they'll go out and, and enjoy that time. So it's a nice break for them too.
So how does the responsible person or the authority for the child, how do they make sure that foster carers are doing what they're supposed to be doing and not adding more to the trauma that they've already experienced?
Right. So, I mean, we are very, very strictly monitored. We have weekly supervisions. We have annual home reviews. Children are spoken to all the time. The children's social worker is one that is constantly keeping an eye on the welfare of the child. We have statutory meetings. So there's a lot of regulation, a lot of statutory requirements that we have to fulfill. And the reason for that is because we are looking at the needs of the child, and that is paramount all of the time. They are being monitored. The expectations don't always translate into practice. Not all families will take their children away on holidays, for example. They are expected to, but they can't for whatever reason. It could be that they're limited. They don't have the resources to take children away. And holidays aren't cheap. So there's lots of ways that the child's welfare and needs are met and monitored, because we have an independent reviewing officer who is somebody who calls meetings every quarter and they preside over it. We have the social workers coming in, the education department coming in, the virtual school. All of these people will give their own synopsis of how the child is doing. So there's lots of yardsticks and measures that would be a way that the professionals look at the progress and how the child is doing emotionally, how they're doing in practical sense, and how they're doing with all the other things in their life, like education and external activities.
Now, what is the percentage? I'm sure there are percentages where the authorities would say we're withdrawing this child, or you as a whole person, we're not going to allow you to do foster caring because such and such happened and we're not happy with that.
That happens all the time. Foster parents get deregulated, they're deregistered. There are times when you as a foster family may serve notice on a child because you can't meet their needs and it's just not working, you're struggling. The child is not happy. There's the dynamic is not working. There are many instances where a child can be taken from your care, including where there's an allegation made. So yes, that happens quite often.
Now, from what I'm hearing and from our conversation, I can see that, mashallah, and thanks to God, that your family, your relationship with your husband, mashallah, I mean, there will be inevitable ups and downs here and there, and that's natural. We're human beings.
Yes.
But it seems as though it's a stable environment.
Yes.
Now, looking at 2024 and how the world is shaping and turning into, I'm talking in the context of our South Asian communities, India, Pakistan, perhaps Bangladeshi Muslims. Divorce rates are all-time high. You mentioned something a little while ago where you talk things through, and it's always a consultative process.
Yes.
However, that's not always the case, and not everyone can do that. When the heat of the moment happens, because ultimately it's anger, right? Anger makes us do everything. Anger makes people kill. Anger makes people get divorced. Anger makes people do everything. So Is it that we have more anger now, or is it lack of understanding, or lack of perspectives, or is it more to do with selfish? I mean, what is it that is causing us to, with the blink of an eye, just separate? I'm talking purely about relationships now.
Yeah. I think there's a lot that's changed, isn't it? I mean, I think there's lots of empowerment for young people now, which perhaps we didn't have. Lots of empowerment for women, the feminist movement, the education, the career progressions. Women are doing incredibly well. They're far more independent and very, very strong the personalities are shining through. So I think there's a little bit of a disparity now between the male and the female coming together. The expectations are higher. The women have higher expectations of men. And I think men are struggling with sometimes coming to, the fore and meeting those expectations. That's one thing. We're in a digital media age. I think generally a lot of societal norms are breaking down. People are more and more withdrawn. They're more into their own selves. The communication skills, ability to give and take, to compromise, to understand that marriage itself is work in progress. There is no such thing as a perfect marriage. Yet things are very disposable. Marriage has become dispensable. If you don't like somebody after day 4, well, just get rid of them. And I think that's an attitude that is coming through. I'm seeing a lot of that. Youngsters are struggling to even get to that point. Youngsters are really struggling to find a match to be able to commit to marriage. There's so many different things that are changing, but I feel that breakdown of family structures, breakdown of communication, there is a huge lack of communication between parents and children. The children lead 2 lives almost essentially. They've got one at home where they're still conforming, they're doing what is expected of them, and outside of the home, it's a completely different ball game, and there is no coming together. Unless something falls apart. And this is causing frustration, this is causing anger. Emotionally, young people are showing to me that they're not able to regulate. They're not able to regulate their emotions because they don't have the support. They're not, within parenting, for example, one of the things that I see all the time is that there is no communication. Children don't feel comfortable talking or sharing with their parents what they're feeling, what their difficulties are. And now we have a rise in mental health. We have a rise in anger, frustration, because of all of these emotional difficulties. And if you are not able to get the support or access somebody who is listening to you even, it's going to build up. And that's when it starts to become a form of aggressive verbal or physical, presentation.
Could it be also that they are not exposed to extreme situations of life, poverty, hunger, so they can appreciate more of what we have, the small things that we have that we don't really appreciate?
Well, I think this generation, I'm 2nd generation British, but my children are 3rd generation British. I absolutely agree. There is a huge inability to appreciate little things. I think they've had it very, very comfortable. Our parents came and worked very, very hard to build something. We have continued in that vein, but our children are enjoying the results of that, and they are spoiled. They are indulged. They've got at their disposal a lot more than we had. So yes.
What are you teaching your son? Obviously, I'm sure he's coming to an age of marriage very soon. God. Or perhaps he's already married. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you mentioned men are having difficulties adjusting and, facing to the reality and the real responsibility that they should have been doing all along. But because of the stigma and the way things have been framed, we just pushed our weight. We threw our weight around and, we got our way because we're men and perhaps,
yes.
This is just the way it is, and we've had a backup system. What are you teaching your children? How do they adjust to the current climate?
With the best will in the world, we've fallen into that trap where our children have been indulged. Now, my eldest is 31. He's still at home. So there is a little bit of a disparity and a bit of a problem there, because if they are enjoying the comforts of being in a safe family environment and they haven't actually stepped out into the big, bad, ugly world and taken on responsibility, and then they step into marriage, it's going to be a huge challenge and it's going to take a lot of time to adjust. So one of the things that I have done as a parent, and my husband and I both on this, we have not differentiated between our children. They are expected to do the same things. My daughters will probably come in here and say, actually, we refute that. We don't fully agree with mum's version of that. And I think that comes from a place of being more protective towards girls in our South Asian culture, I think generally.
Quite naturally.
Yeah, quite natural. But girls can fight that, can't they? They're quite sort of, well, hang on, we're not allowed to do this, but they are. That sort of thing. However, generally speaking, I came from an upbringing where my father and my mother were very empowering and allowed us to explore and do things independently. So I have the same ethos with my children. Moving forward, I think it's going to be a huge adjustment for the boys when they get married, because girls are very feisty, and rightly so. They know their mind. They are very, very successful. They're educated, and they don't want a lame excuse making husband, and they certainly don't want somebody who is going to throw their weight around, just for the sake of it. They have to add value. Both people in a marriage have to come together and add value, and I think that's the only way to make it work.
So what other practical advice are you giving your son? Hey, you know what, you're going to expect such and such, because I'm sure you are exposed to various scenarios, I'm sure you've witnessed, maybe marriage breakdowns, or someone recently got married, they're having some issues. What are you telling your son? Like, son, you know what, you're going to expect such and such, and be ready, and this is how you would navigate? Or are you just leaving it to him?
I've got two sons, and my conversation with them is that firstly, you need to understand that women have to be loved and respected, whatever situation throws at you, whatever the circumstances are. They have to be loved and respected, and they all have their own place in your circle. Your wife is kind of up there, your mother is there, your sisters are there. These are women that are nurturers. These are the people who build communities. These are the people who raise and have children, and therefore they're to be respected. But for my sons, I suggest that they have to be the providers. They have to give their women the opportunity to decide what they want to do. It is not on them to raise a family and be the breadwinners and be the ones taking on responsibility if they don't want to. I personally chose to stay at home with my children. It was my preference, and I'm going to get shot down for this. Career women will disagree, and I absolutely feel that it's a personal choice. But if I have a choice of whether I would just stay at home and raise a family and give them all my input, my value of my experience and knowledge, then that's my preference. I would rather do that than to go out and build a career. Having said that, there's nothing wrong with either or. I'm just saying that a man should be able to support his partner in a way that the wife can make that decision, make that choice, and it's got to work in cohesion. It can't be done in isolation.
And absolutely, and I think both parties should also take logical steps to understand what the dynamic could be, and not just assume. Because I feel a lot of people, although they can see certain flags, but they just assume these flags would change for some reason, after they've got married. But in reality, it actually just becomes worse.
Youngsters, we all struggle with seeing red flags and having an intuition about something not quite adding up and then ignoring it.
Yeah.
Human nature. But yes, I think that's what needs to be done. Conversations need to be had, and they are very difficult conversations.
Absolutely.
If you as a parent can see that your child is actually veering towards a potentially difficult scenario and you want to warn them, it's not easy.
No.
Children don't receive input at that stage, particularly if they're in love or they're infatuated. It's very difficult, It's a struggle, but it has to be done.
Absolutely.
You have to, because as a parent, you're the only person who's going to have that positioning to say the truth and be able to rebuild on that. Because
Yeah.
if somebody else says it, that's it, end of relationship. But as a parent, you have to believe that you're going to be the one that will tell them what you think, and then hopefully they'll be able
How
to.
do you, as a parent, build that trust with your child? You know what? My mom said it, my dad said it. I know they're not gonna want bad for me, and for that reason, I should consider. Because I've been in that situation where I was just told like, don't do this and don't do that, and that's it. There is no explanation. Generally, if I get a context, then I would understand, okay, do you know what, it makes sense. But as you said, sometimes, I mean, most of the time when you're in love, you're blind. You're not listening to anything. Although you're listening, but you're not listening. Can parents also build that trust from earlier on with their child? Because we expect our children to behave in a certain way with us because we're parents and because we said so. But I feel that's changing nowadays. It's becoming very decentralized and democratic, where you have to win your, trust and, that relationship.
Well, I talk about this all the time, actually. So there's ages and stages. When your children are young, you are the authoritarian parent, because you're going to show them what to do, what is right and wrong. You're not going to talk to them about not touching the gas.
Yeah.
You're going to remove their hand, and that's how you parent. But as they grow older, you have to change the way that you parent, particularly when they hit the teens. Now you can't be just telling them that they can't do something. You have to open up a conversation. You have to be able to now come down a notch or two, not necessarily befriend them, but be more open to having communication. And that is when you start building the trust. If at that age you lose them, I think then you've lost them. That is a very transitional age. And that is when they fight back, because that is when they are finding out who they are. They're experiencing independence. They're experiencing new things. That's when they're going to be testing boundaries. They're going to be testing you. And if you are continually reacting the way that you think you deserve to react because you're the parent, that is probably when you're going to lose them. And when they shut down and feel that they can't trust you at that point and to share things with you, I think then that's pretty much how it's going to be from then on. Opening up channels of communication is quite difficult. So really you do need to be offering a listening ear. It's very hard to listen. Listening is a technique and it's an art. You have to really learn how to listen. It's not easy.
Listening.
I struggle with it even now. It's so difficult to listen. But you also have to understand, and this is something very empowering that my parents instilled in me, is that and I see myself accommodating that now. There was a point when you're parenting your children. I would call it practical parenting. You are doing things with them and for them. Then they are now growing and you're going to step back a little bit and let them continue. And then there comes a point when actually you're going to listen to them more because they're actually now robust, very educated, intelligent beings. You step back and now they're kind of almost inputting and parenting you to some extent. And I think we should allow that. Because that's how we
I mean, I think that's
learn.
how life goes.
Yes.
Initially you take care of your baby and then you
Yeah.
become old and then they take care of you as well in physical form.
But before that physical care, there is that stage where they come back with inputs and perspectives which are far better, far more informed because they're the new generation.
100%.
And so they have lots to say to you and you've got to listen to it.
I mean, I learn a lot from my own children
Absolutely.
because they are more clued on with what's happening. And this is my hack to just get the information that I require.
Yeah. Do you know what? They make things so much more crystal clear for you sometimes.
Yeah,
and they
absolutely.
say it how it is.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think, I mean, our age is probably changing their perspectives and how they parent. But my last question, and I hope there wouldn't be any follow-up questions from that. We are towards the end. Now, as a society, Islam, Muslims, we place huge importance on a family structure, and that is probably the biggest priority in Islam. For example, if you were back home, if you had trouble, because we're all same, you would go with someone's parents' name or whose child are you? And then I know your parents. Then we can solve problems if there are any issues. That's because you don't need law enforcement to sort problems out. However, in this part of the world, the part that we're living in at the moment, West, United Kingdom, USA, Canada, Europe, the family system is pretty much broken. Do you think the requirement for fostering is coming from more from the Western societies or more from, I guess, Muslim societies or South Asian communities? Or is it quite balanced? Or where does it all sit? Because I feel naturally we have a better family system because we value it. And that's why we should have less requirement for a child to be fostered, a Muslim child or a child from South Asian community.
So one of the reasons why I'm building a forum and I want to start raising a conversation is because I personally, and this is my own belief, I personally believe that we are just as dysfunctional in our so-called family units in the South Asian community as the very blatantly disintegrated family structures in the West. The difference being is that within the Western culture, you are seeing the results of a lot of trauma, abuse and neglect going on within families because it's out there, it's spoken about, it becomes visually available. Whereas with ours, it's still very much hidden.
Yeah, true.
And so my reason for now wanting to build and talk about taboo subjects and things that are very important and are impacting our, the more you speak to young people, they are suffering in silence. So many people, young people, are victims to so many things going on within closed doors because we still have that belief that we can keep things contained, we can deal with them, but actually we can't. And those things are erupting. They are erupting slowly and steadily. More and more children are coming into the care system. More and more families are falling apart. And if they're holding family structures together, it is probably because of an extension of the patriarchal system that we have. We have authority and fear. If you have families that are led by fear because somebody at the head of the family holds that control, then of course they may to the outside world seem to be very solid structures, but actually from within they're crumbling. Termite has hit.
Wow. You're so right.
Yeah.
Because we do like to cover things up because of our reputation.
Yes.
We don't want anyone to know. And we see that within our family. If someone's getting divorced and, oh my God, don't talk about it. My daughter's not going to get married again or my son's going to have issues. So we are very good at with our PR, at least in one aspect, where we damage control. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Western society is just, it's for them, it's just normal.
Yes. I mean, that's not to say that there's other factors, demographics, poverty, socioeconomic factors, where you are in society, the stratas, those things that also impact and influence what we're seeing around us. But South Asian societies, I believe, they're just very, very closed.
Wow. That is, it's a very touchy subject for me, this whole fostering aspect, because I just feel like it shouldn't exist. It shouldn't happen that way unless someone's entire family died or something and they don't have anyone to go to. But generally, I feel like I wish there was a button that I could press and all the poverty is gone and all the dysfunction of a society is gone. I wish.
And that's the ideal scenario for all of us. But what we can do is work with what we have. And this is a interim kind of stopgap for so many children where they can potentially be helped and supported to get themselves back on track. It doesn't work for all of them, because sometimes it's just not long enough for a change to be made, like a real change. But so many children have benefited from being in fostering because it's given them that chance that they would never have had.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, for me to just comprehend how you do it, honestly, is commendable.
Thank you.
I don't know if I personally would be able to, because I would become very emotional and very emotionally attached, and I wouldn't probably want them to go either, because I would want them to just be my family.
Shafiq, the thing is, when you go into fostering, you are prepared, you're trained, and one of the things that you understand fully is that it's going to be a short-term thing. So a child could be with you for a day, couple of weeks, months, years, and obviously the longer they're with you, then that break is harder.
Yeah.
When you say goodbye, it's much tougher. But we always, at the back of our mind, know that there's a care plan and we're working towards that care plan. And even from day one, for example, unaccompanied minors that come into our care, of course we have a bond with them, but we know that they are very likely to move on within a year, 2 years. So although it's sad to say goodbye, but it's not heart-wrenching.
I'm sure it's just emotional. It
is
plays
a
with your
roller coaster.
emotions,
Yes,
you know, like,
yes.
oh man.
It is hard, it's not easy, and that's why not everybody can do it.
Absolutely.
That's why we have a lot of critics, but we have very few people coming forward, and that's why we want to raise and talk about it more,
And
so that more people...
I hope we have
Thank
been
you.
able to at least spark that conversation, and I'm sure people will think about it at
Yes,
least.
yes.
It has certainly made me think, for sure, because my wife,
glad.
after watching your stuff, she did bring it up a lot, you
Yeah.
know, and I'm like, let's, let's focus on the two that we've got, and let's, build them up first, and we'll see where it goes, inshallah. But it's not a no for me, for sure, because that is something that I always think about, and being able to generally I like to add value to people's life,
Yes.
you know. If someone comes to me for help, advice, then where others might say, there's a fee for hourly fee. But I'm like, you know what? It's a knowledge, it's the experience that I've gained. You know what? It's free. I'm going to share it. So if I can add value to someone's life and they make something
There's
of it.
certainly a need. Please come on board.
Wow.
Definitely explore it. And your children will only benefit. They will learn, their understanding of life and reality of life will grow exponentially.
Absolutely, I think so.
Yeah.
Now, we normally end with a quick-fire question. Try and keep it as brief as possible. Your favorite memory with a foster child?
My favorite memory with my foster children is always on holidays. The fun that we have.
Give me one. Give me a specific one where you were moved by this experience.
Oh, there's so many, Shafiq. I don't know where to start. I can't think of one right now. There's so many children when they go on holiday, climb their first peak. One of our children hiked up the first peak, and that was a very, very special moment for us because this is a child who had fear of heights. That was great. There's lots and lots of emotional moments, but for me, it's more about the pleasure of seeing children having fun and growing. That is got to be the most memorable thing for me.
Wow. Best activity to do with your foster children? I mean, apart from holiday, you've already said holiday.
All my children are straight into martial arts of some description, physical sports, and that's what we all do.
Amazing. Now, I know you said don't ask me about books. What book would you suggest to anyone that has become interested? I'm sure they can reach out to you on your TikTok, they can join your lives, and I'm sure they will benefit. But is there any book that you can recommend to someone that can read up on?
Right, okay, so if you're interested in coming on the fostering journey, I suggest you DM me or come on my lives. That's the only way. The books that are written on subjects around trauma, attachment theory, are things that you will need to look at once you become a foster parent, and there's so many of them. So come on, DM me, message me, and...
Amazing. Now, top tip, once you've become a foster parent or carer, what's that one golden advice that you can give or tip?
You have to have the patience of a saint.
Wow. I guess patience has many virtues, and I suppose, patience is amazing.
And the other, if you want a personality trait, one of the things that I think, alhamdulillah, has held us in good stead is calm. You need to be a calm person.
I mean, these are so transferable. These two things that you've mentioned, patience and staying calm.
Yeah.
There's so much reward. There's so much worldly reward. I mean, I try to do patience, practice patience, and stay calm. And I've seen the reward. And now I think as I'm become a little bit older, slightly older, nearly hitting my 40s very soon, I've seen the beauty of patience, and it can never fail you. Patience never fails you.
No. The thing that if I was to look at that in general for all of us as human beings is so important. But as a foster parent, one of the things that we learn the hard way, and it's actually quite traumatic for us at times, is to not take things personally when children are lashing out or being aggressive or generally displaying their frustration, anger. They're not necessarily directing it at you. That is one thing that we have learned as a foster family, that we've got to try not to take things personally.
Amazing. Sash Bee, thank you so much for joining us today. It's
been a pleasure.
It's been an enlightening conversation for me. And as I said, I tried to keep myself composed, but certain aspects you were saying, it was like inside I'm crying, but I'm just trying to keep composed.
It does evoke emotion, and I hope that people will be interested in coming on board and thinking about opening their homes up, because a little help can go a long way.
And that's it for today on Side by Side. I hope you have enjoyed our eye-opening, enlightening and insightful conversation with our guest, Sash Bee. If you have taken something away, if you have learned something, and if it has provoked your thoughts, please do comment below with any questions, any comments, and any experiences that you may have with foster caring. And don't forget to subscribe onto the platform you are tuned into, because it is your subscription that motivates us to edge forward episode by episode. And inshallah, with you by our side, we will reach the top. With that being said, I will see you on our next episode. Stay well, stay safe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.